On June 30th, 1912, the city of Regina progressed along as it always had for the previous 25 years. It was a bustling community of 30,000 people and was basking in the glow of a new legislative building that had been built. 7 years after it had been declared the capital of Saskatchewan, things were looking up for the community. Little did anyone know on that day, a defining event was about to occur. As the day wore on, and the weather became hot and muggy, clouds began to form in the horizon. It soon became clear that a thunderstorm was coming. Now, thunderstorms were not unusual for this time of year in Regina, but this thunderstorm would bring something else. By the time the thunderstorm on the horizon had passed, 28 people would be dead, 200 would be injured, and houses and lives would be destroyed, along with millions of dollars in damages. At 4:50 p.m., an F4 tornado, the strongest that had ever been seen in Canada at that time, touched down south of the city near where the Trans-Canada Highway and Albert Street intersect. Roughly 10 kilometers south of the downtown core, what would be known as the Regina Cyclone had been born. Described as a cloud that was darker than an ace of spades, with a sound that sounded like 40 million shrieking devils, the tornado began to move east. The first victim of the tornado, property-wise, was the farm of Thomas Bears. The farm was completely destroyed, but thankfully no one was killed. The tornado continued its path of destruction through the countryside outside of Regina. Walter Stevenson would lose his farm, followed by the farm of John Dunlop as the tornado continued to move towards downtown. By the time the tornado reached the home of Robert Kerr, the first fatality was about to happen. While Kerr and his family were not killed, only injured, it was their guest, Andrew Roy, who would perish, sadly. If the tornado had continued on its original path, it would have moved towards Winnipeg Street, an area that had few homes at that time. Instead, it moved to the north, heading straight towards downtown. Brushing up against the Saskatchewan legislature, only minimal damage occurred with a few blown-out windows. At that point, the tornado began to move across Wascana Lake, picking up water and showering residents throughout the area. The Regina Boat Club was the next in the path of the tornado, with its swimming houses, boats, and buildings completely destroyed. 2 deaths would occur here, that of Vincent Smith and Philip Steele. The tornado continued moving to the north at this point, destroying many homes and killing 8 more people as it progressed over College Avenue, destroying much on Lorne and Smith Street. As it passed over Victoria Avenue, the tornado heavily damaged the Metropolitan Methodist Church, which today is known as the Knox Metropolitan United Church. Next door, the YMCA building was destroyed. The church, which had been erected only a few months earlier at the cost of $75,000, was an especially hard loss for the people of the community. The tornado continued to move north and out of downtown where it hit the CP rail yard and began throwing rail cars around like toys. Moving at this point into the warehouse district, the tornado hit several more buildings and took the top floor off the Ackerman building. By the time it had passed through, 5 more people were dead. Through its path from the CP rail yard through the warehouse district, it is estimated that some firms lost $200,000 in funds from the damages to equipment and the loss of merchandise. The tornado then left the city, leaving behind a massive trail of destruction. It would take years for Regina and its residents to recover from the storm. The storm would have other impacts as well beyond the destruction. The Association of Regina Realtors was created on July 10, 1912, when several real estate agents came together to address the task of repairing and restoring much of the property that had been destroyed in the storm. The storm also caused a real estate boom, and the organization dealt with the speculation in property that was beginning to rise at that time. As with other major events such as this, there are many stories to tell. There are many tales around that storm, from the bowling pins that did not fall down, to the boy in the canoe and the horse in the legislature, to Boris Karloff helping in the relief effort. Among those tales are the people who lived the storm and experienced it, many of whom are now lost to history. The Regina Boat Club. With Dominion Day coming on July 1st, optimism was high at the Regina Boat Club. The 1912 Dominion Day Regatta was going to be held, and a 3-piece orchestra was hired for a dance that would follow the activities of the day. Little did any of the band members know, nor the members of the club know, was that not a single note of music would be played. The club had spent the previous 2 years renovating its boathouse and had built a $1,400 extension along with a new pier to pull boats out on. Many new boats were sitting at that pier, and the building even had electricity and a phone on that fateful day. Then the Regina Cyclone happened, and everything was lost. By the time the tornado passed, members had lost everything in their club, and only $600 was left in their pockets to rebuild. It did not take long for the club to begin rebuilding, and within a week they had incorporated the club and began selling shares for $10 each, and they also arranged for a $3,600 loan. By the end of summer, a new clubhouse costing $2,680 was built, and a dance was held in September of 1912 to commemorate the reopening. In 1968, with the Regina Boat Club long gone, Bevan Lawson came up with the idea of having a cairn installed at Wascana Park to honor the club and the destruction of the Regina Cyclone. 3 years later, during Saskatchewan's homecoming celebrations, a cairn was unveiled at the original location at the boathouse. Francis Nicholson Darke. Arriving in Regina in 1892, where he married his wife Anna Elizabeth, Francis Darke established a retail and meat business that allowed him to build a huge fortune. Serving on council for 9 terms and elected as Regina's youngest mayor in 1898, he would lose his home to the cyclone. His wife, terrified of such a thing happening again, urged him to build a new home that could survive a tornado. Over the course of the next several years, he built her a home that would survive a tornado. By the time it was completed in 1926, it was the most expensive home ever built in Regina to that time. It still stands today and is known as the Stone Hall Castle. Sitting across from Darke Hall, it was the home for him and his wife until their deaths. Fred Birkin. Fred Birkin had come to Regina from Dinsmore, Saskatchewan in a roundabout way. Living in Edmonton with his new wife, Martha Peckrell, he found work with the CPR in Regina, and they made the move in 1912. Edmonton at the time was dealing with a housing shortage, so finding a place in Regina was much more desirable for the young couple. Earning $3.25 a day, Birkin was on the job when the Regina Cyclone came tearing through his workplace, completely destroying the building. The incident would leave Birkin unconscious, and he would not awaken until after the storm had passed. Finding himself on top of a pile of timbers, he escaped relatively uninjured except for some bruises and a few minor cuts. Adolph Martin. Living north of Regina, Adolph and his helper Henry Hollerbaum were working in the field when the cyclone came upon them. As they were far north of the property that Martin owned, they had been camping in a caboose during the evenings. That caboose then became their refuge when the storm hit. The cyclone hit the caboose and began to rock it back and forth, which caused the heater inside to come loose. Coupled with the rocking, the heater now chased the men around the caboose as the wind whipped up a mini-storm inside the shelter. Over at his homestead, Adolph's wife Louise was dealing with her own situation from the storm. The roof on the barn was completely ripped off, and bits of wood began flying around the homestead. One piece of wood came flying towards the house and became lodged in the door frame. If it had made it into the room, it would have killed the 3 children in there. Henry Hollerbaum's wife ran to the granary where her husband and her had been staying to grab her baby to protect it. While she was in there, a grain bin was thrown in front of the door where it remained. She was trapped in that granary until she was rescued several hours later. Greville MacDougall. Born in Manitoba in 1900, Greville MacDougall was one of 8 children and was 10 years old when the family moved to Regina. Unfortunately, it would be a tragic decision to do so. When the Regina Cyclone hit, Greville would lose her father and 2 of her sisters in the storm. They would account for 3 of the 28 victims. Eventually, Greville would go to school and become a stenographer for both the Pat Burns Company and the CPR. She would marry a lawyer named Alan Armstrong in 1922, and together they would live in Strasbourg for 45 years, where they would be highly active in many community matters and raise 3 children. Alan died in 1977, while Greville would die several years later. Thank you for watching the latest episode of Canadian History X.